Some people fight for money. Some fight for respect. Some fight because it's the only way out. Others because it's the only thing they know. Some fight for their country. Some fight to stay alive. Some fight for the people they love. And some because everything else has been taken from them. This episode's a bit different. Yes, we'll talk boxing. There's a big fight coming up. We'll also tell the story of Leen Sanders, a man who fought more battles than any person ever should. Not every fight happens under bright lights. Not every fighter hears the final bell. Some fights are about survival, and some are about remembering, so it never, ever happens again. This is the Sporting Almanac Podcast. Good evening, Ben.
Hello, mate.
How are you today?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm enjoying the plethora of sport that's on offer at the moment with the Lions and the Wimbledon that's obviously just finished and the transfer window. Yeah, all sorts going on, isn't there? How are you?
I'm good. It doesn't feel like that long since we recorded at all, because it isn't.
No.
Due to the unique scheduling issues we have this week. It's not been long at all, but obviously that's a good thing.
It is, this is fun, and we enjoy doing it. That's the primary motivation. So, but yeah, we're talking boxing this week.
We are, which is it's a sport that I love the stories about boxing. I love the history of boxing. I love people in boxing. I love boxers themselves. I love people around it. The actual sport itself, there's something it misses. I think modern boxing, I just don't trust it. I think is more than anything. I don't know if anything you'll, educate me on today will change my mind on that.
I doubt it.
It just feels a bit like I'm a fan of the WWE.
Mate, you're saying exactly what I was thinking. Carry on.
I trust the WWE because I know nothing that's happening on screen is real. When it comes to boxing, it's meant to be completely real. It's meant to be completely genuine. I just don't entirely trust it a lot of the time.
Mm-hmm.
Especially, obviously, with the modern YouTubers turned fighters that you get and the nonsensical matchups between long retired fighters and people who are famous for reasons that are beyond me in my 30s. But even beyond that, even with normal fluff, it feels very drama-driven for a sport which is about as pure as a sport can get, in my eyes, in terms of the actual sport, which is weird. I guess it works. I guess it makes money, but maybe it loses a romance.
I agree with virtually everything you said. I think it's a sport that a lot of people pretend to know a lot about. But don't really know anything about it at all. We were joking on our last episode about toxic masculinity, and I would say the vast majority of men think that they are in a position to opine on boxing in a way that perhaps you would feel foolish if you were attempting to do so with any degree of sophistication on most other sports. I personally have no fucking clue what's going on when I watch it. I barely understand how the rules apply.
Yeah.
I don't have any idea how it's scored, but as a sport, it's pretty absorbing. As you say, it champions some pure characteristics that you associate with sport and why it's become such a sort of a human phenomenon, I guess, in terms of enjoyment and pastime.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I completely agree with you. I literally wrote down in preparation for this one that it's as close as you get to WWE in terms of pantomime.
Yeah.
But it's also just a circus or unauthentic sometimes.
Yeah.
Very controversial.
Not even subtle about it a lot of the time as well.
Yeah, unapologetically, arguably. It's almost like it's become part of its culture. It's like routinely controversial.
Yeah, I mean, I don't watch a whole load of boxing matches, I must admit. When there's something good on and it's on free-to-view TV or at a channel that I already pay for, I will put it on and I will watch it. And in the last 10 bouts I've watched over the past sort of year or two, I can probably count 3 or 4 times, and I understand I maybe don't understand the rules of boxing or how the scoring system works, but I felt, and the commentators agreed with me, I felt fairly outraged at the end of watching it by some of the decisions that were made. It just feels unconnected to reality sometimes. And it's usually the underdog that ends up losing in that scenario.
Yeah.
Like the guy who wasn't meant to win.
Often doesn't get the rub of the green. Yeah.
Mm.
I think all of that is fair, personally, at least. I'm sure there will be some boxing aficionados out there who would, be screaming at us.
Who we've already
offended.
Massively alienated.
Yeah, and offended. So let's try and apply some balance. In terms of the athletes, the boxers, it is a pretty astonishing display of athleticism. Like, it's definitely not just a sport for brutes. It's very skillful, very disciplined, very graceful. And a lot of the best fighters are not necessarily the guys who go KOing every person that stands in their way, but more often than not, like the best defensive fighters, the ones who are capable of avoiding being hit.
Yeah.
And one of the guys who is going to be a feature of this episode, Oleksandr Usyk, is very much in that camp. He is not a knockout merchant. And Floyd Mayweather, people like Floyd Mayweather is arguably one of the best pound for pounds all time. Sugar Ray Leonard, Muhammad Ali, even. It's all, the most skillful guys often rise to the top, not the most powerful necessarily. And so that, in that context, boxing is still a riveting sport worth our time.
Yeah, it is. And from what I've done, from what I know about it, different countries have different opinions about how boxing should be fought, like traditionally speaking. Like the British were always big, which weirdly I'm getting the vibe we are big on technique and positioning and cunning in the ring. That was always things that appeal to us, whereas just talk a lot about the Dutch today. The Dutch just like attacking boxers, just boxers who are going to go out, put their body and soul on the line, throw a few punches. I think one of the great things about the sport is there's a million different ways you can go about it, and each can be as effective as the other, and you can flip a coin on some days whether it's going to work or not. Guy can come out swinging punches and all it takes is one to get through.
Yeah.
Or another guy can come out playing a tactical game and
Buster Douglas
box themselves into a corner and lose that way. Yeah, Buster Douglas, great example. One of the biggest upsets of all time.
This is the thing. It's a sport with incredible reach, to be fair.
No pun intended.
Yeah, well, maybe pun intended, although you're probably quite right to be sceptical about my intentions there. I'm not that clever or fast-witted. Quick-witted. There you go. There's another example. But it does have incredible reach in the sense that the armchair fan doesn't really need to know anything about boxing to enjoy it.
No.
I think that's why it's one of it's one of those sports that appeals.
Yeah, I stayed up, I remember, till the wee small hours of the morning once. I must have been 12, 13 years old to watch a Lennox Lewis fight. The one he lost against Rahman, was it?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So that would have been when I was about 13, 14, something like that. And I don't know why I was so excited, but I didn't know anything about boxing. I'd only seen a few fights on TV. I knew a bit about Muhammad Ali and Mike Tyson and the rest, but I didn't know any more than that. And yet I was so enthralled, and I stay up, kept myself awake, and watched this fight when I knew nothing about the sport other than the fundamentals, which are fairly simple.
Yeah.
And yeah, I really enjoyed that. And it was a surprise result as well.
Yeah. And I guess that's another part of its big appeal, isn't it? It is a sport that you do get upsets in. It's just you tend not to get them on points. You tend to get them by KO or stoppage, TKO. I mean, our skepticism is well placed, though, mate, because the governance of this sport is insane.
Yes.
It is the Wild West. I haven't even tried to research it thoroughly because I'm not sure that you can ever really give it a succinct answer. But do you want me to give it a go?
Yeah, absolutely, always.
So, I thought you'd enjoy this. There are currently 40, that's 40 governing bodies worldwide.
Nice.
Now, you might think that's historical. And you'd be wrong, because half of them have been created since 2000. It's mad.
Jesus.
Right. So that...
And are these worldwide boxing bodies?
Yeah.
Not like the US.
Professional and amateur. Yeah. Worldwide.
Fair enough.
International. The key thing is there are 4 major sanctioning bodies. And they are the International Boxing Federation, the IBF, the World Boxing Organization, the WBO, the World Boxing Council, the WBC, and the World Boxing Association, the WBA. Now, taking that slowly, the WBA was formed in 1921. But it's based in the US, and it used to be the National Boxing Association. It's the oldest of the major sanctioning bodies. Then comes the WBC, and that's now based in Mexico, and that effectively just rivaled the WBA. That was the motivation for it, and successfully, because the WBC is widely considered the most prestigious of the sanctioning bodies and world title belts that you can hold.
Okay.
Then the IBF come along, and the IBF split out of the WBA. But to the IBF's credit, they only have one belt per division, weight division.
Okay.
So they keep things quite simple. So we kind of like the IBF. And then more recently, and I don't really know why they formed, but the most recent one is the WBO, who are based in Puerto Rico. They also took the longest to gain international recognition. They only got full recognition in 2004, when I think it was the WBC agreed to recognise them. But they're the least prestigious. Anyhow.
Fair enough.
These four are the only four major sanctioning bodies recognised by the International Boxing Hall of Fame.
Okay.
And they are largely unified in their approach to the sport, and they recognise each other. Each organisation, though, has its own titles for the 17 weight divisions in boxing. The WBA is an outlier because it actually has 4 titles awarded to champions in each division. We're not going to get into that. It's mad. Who cares? But basically, you can have 4 world champions or 4 different types of world champions, some of which might be held simultaneously at the same time in under the WBA.
It sounds needlessly complicated.
It is, man.
Frankly.
It is.
I mean, if you were designing from scratch, this isn't necessarily what you do. I feel like this should be, and don't get me wrong, I'm never a big fan of governing bodies generally, or overriding governing bodies, or concentrating power in one set of hands, CC FIFA. But it feels like they could do with like a parent body that sits above them and decides who actually is the champion. But anyway, I digress. This is just me and my brain being fried by your description so far.
No, but I think that's a really good idea, because like obviously the sport, as we've already said, has been like riddled with stories of corruption and bribery and match fixing and influencing of judges and referees, and it's obviously got its fair share of doping scandals. Yeah. But apparently, despite all of that, and despite everything that you've just observed, they do try to work together to bring the fans the best possible fights. However, the biggest issue is that they have different mandatory challenges and different time frames in which champions have to defend their titles. So you often see vacated belts or different people being given priority for challenging the holder of 2 belts. And it just becomes a bit of a mess.
A palaver, yeah.
Yeah. And if you want to confuse things even more, because, this is not clear, there are other sanctioning bodies, minor ones, who also give out belts, and some of them claim to give out world titles. They're just not as prestigious. And the best example of that would be the International Boxing Organization, or the IBO, who you might have heard of.
I have, yeah.
Yeah, that doesn't...
I never realised they were minor, but...
Doesn't count. Yeah, it doesn't count. It does count. I'm being harsh. But it's not a recognised major world title. So that is the governance. So if you're starting from that premise, like, it's going to be a mess, right? The good news is that obviously we're going to be talking a little bit about Dubois versus Usyk later, and that is a unified fight. So they are fighting for all of the belts.
Exactly.
So we can,
and the amount to which that simplifies it in my brain is it cannot even be over-exaggerated. Whoever wins those belts will be the best boxer in the world in their weight class, and it's very simple to understand.
Yes.
I don't have to know the politics of it. I don't have to know which is the, why is this belt more prestigious than this. Bang them all together. Never separate them.
It would be a lot easier. But, we are where we are. And you and I will not fix it on a single episode. So we shouldn't try. But what we should do is introduce people very quickly to the weight classes, because you've mentioned them, I've mentioned them. They're going to become relevant. There are 17 in total. I'm not going to list them all, but other than heavyweight, which we've already mentioned, we're predominantly going to be talking about boxers in the lightweight, welterweight, and middleweight divisions. They are, generally speaking, pretty much in the middle of the weight classes, those three. Heavyweight's obviously at the top, but the three I just mentioned are in the middle. There are 8 classes below lightweight and 4 above middleweight. But if you wanted to complicate things even further, in modern times, there is now a bridge between lightweight and welterweight and middleweight, which are now known as the super lightweight and the super welterweight. But they were introduced in the late 50s and 60s, so they are not going to be relevant for the purposes of the era and the weight divisions that you're probably going to be focusing on.
No.
And teeing you up very quickly, we are not going to tell the history of boxing. Just reassure some people of that. It's too long to recite. We're going to focus on a particular era. You're going to tell us about that era in a minute and who the boxers are. But yeah, I mean, it's probably worth mentioning that, and everybody knows this, but it's worth mentioning that people have enjoyed watching people fight for time immemorial.
Probably the very first sport that ever existed.
Yeah.
Realistically, is 2 cavemen battering each other and a few people sitting down with cave popcorn to watch.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, historically, boxing didn't even have an end, did it? People would fight until they would quit or even died. So, yeah. Anyway, I think that's all I've got to say at the moment, mate. I'll talk a little bit more about Usyk and Dubois and co, and maybe the heavyweight division a little bit later. But over to you, because you've got some pretty insane stuff that you want to talk about on this.
I do, yeah. I'm going to talk about a specific era of boxing and a specific story from a book I've read. My story primarily is about a boxer who was born in Rotterdam in 1908, whose name was Leen Sanders. So Leen Sanders was a Jewish boxer born to a Jewish family in Rotterdam. They were practicing Jews. They were close to the community in Rotterdam at the time, which had a big Jewish community in the early 1900s. Throughout his life, Leen Sanders had many fights. Some he won, some he lost, some he overturned the odds, some were rigged from the start. So yeah, it's a good story, and I hope you enjoy this one.
All the hallmarks as well of the sorts of things we were talking about earlier, really.
Yeah, funnily enough.
Well, I'm sure we're going to enjoy this. I know a little bit about this because you've obviously, when you first read it, you told me about it. But I'm looking forward to hearing more about it. Yeah,
this is it's a bit of a deep dive compared to other stories we've done previously, so it will take up most of the episode, but I think it's worth it. It tells the story of Leen Sanders and a lot of boxers he comes across along the way who had some different outcomes to their lives, different outcomes to their careers, and it's a good story, so here we go. So, Leen Sanders, as I said, born in Rotterdam in 1908. The area he grew up in was fairly dilapidated. Part of a Jewish family, working class but respectable. His dad was a waffle maker, making stroop waffles. If anyone's aware
very
of
Dutch.
stroop waffles, there's almost nothing more Dutch, and they are blooming delicious. And I would recommend anyone to get themselves on some, especially authentic ones, if you're ever in the Netherlands and Rotterdam particularly. He spoke with a Rotterdam dialect with a Yiddish accent. He had a big family. His parents, his 5 brothers, 4 sisters, an aunt and uncle all lived in the same house. It had mouldy walls, woodworm, lice, fleas and bugs. Not much light, and often a lot of hunger as well when they were younger.
Boxing's traditionally a working class sport.
Very much, yeah.
Well, that's how you would refer to it in the UK, because it's so accessible, because you don't need anything other than a pair of gloves. And back in the day, not even that, arguably. And it sounds, I'm just saying, it just sounds like, this is a quintessential background story, really.
It really is, yeah. And I think what you need more than anything is you need bravery. You need to understand the sport. You need to be willing to put the effort in, hard-working. And those who put the effort in have a chance of breaking out. It might not be making it to the very top, but you can make a career out of it. And this is a good example of that. So it was obviously his ambition to be a pro boxer, along with some of his brothers as well. A chance to break out from his life. They used to save up money when they were kids to go to the cinema to watch boxing matches featuring Jack Dempsey, Josh Carpentier. His idol was Benny Leonard, though, who was a Jewish American who fought with a Star of David on his shorts and who originally started fighting to resist Jew hate in New York City, which is another story as old as time, another reason working class people, especially working class people from ethnic minority backgrounds, start boxing. It is a good defensive sport, and that comes up a few times in this story as well, outside of the context of the ring. So he left school young, worked in the family business. He made his amateur debut in 1925, when he was 17 years old, in a smoky ring surrounded by dockers, labourers, salesmen, and other working men. He won comfortably on points and impressed in doing so. So his early career was successful as an amateur. He was invited to an amateur boxing tournament in Dusseldorf, in what was then the German Weimar Republic. His first trip to Germany, his first trip out of the Netherlands, representing the Netherlands for the first time. He was famed for his double defence. It was a hermetic defence where he protected himself first and foremost and chose his moments to attack. He was an evasive fighter, he was a defensive fighter, and he was very hard to land a punch on. And that was, as we said before, one way of going about it.
If you said what weight did he start in, mate? Do you know, or are you coming to that?
He started off as a lightweight, and then later in his career, he put on more muscle and became first a welterweight, and then ended up as a middleweight later on. So, but he was quite small in stature. So, when he was a middleweight, he was often fighting against people who were much bigger than he was, or at least much taller than he was. Obviously, similar weight.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. I only asked because you mentioned that you won on points and stuff, and a lot more of the lighter weights go to points because obviously the guys are not as powerful. And so there's less knockouts.
Yeah.
So that just piqued my interest. But sorry, carry on, because this is super interesting.
No, of course. Yeah, so one of his teammates as an amateur was a man named Bep van Klaveren, a boisterous, talented vegetarian featherweight, a year older than he was. Bep would go on to win the gold medal at the 1928 Olympics before turning professional, and he will come up in this story later on as well.
Oh, nice.
So Leen went professional in 1926, travelled to London for his first pro fight, at the Ring in Blackfriars, a legendary working-class British venue that saw its heyday around this sort of time, before going into decline, obviously with the Depression coming up. And then it got itself destroyed by a couple of Luftwaffe bombs in the Blitz, unfortunately, as much of London did.
Mm-hmm.
It was run at this point by a woman named Bella Burge, who was believed to be the world's first female boxing promoter, known as Bella of Blackfriars, a job she took on after her predecessor, who was her husband, died during the Spanish flu epidemic of 1918, having survived the trenches, which is very unfortunate.
That's a bum draw, that.
It happened to a lot of young men at that time. That was an epidemic that targeted young, healthy men more than anyone else. Leen's first fight was against Eddie Hutton. He won in by knockout in round 3. He left the fight with a pocket full of money and developing a cauliflower ear as well, which he wasn't happy about, but will later form quite an important part of this story, shall we say. So he started off strongly in his pro career, won 10 of his first 14 matches. He drew one of them, 2 of his losses being disqualifications for hitting below the belt. He didn't have a reputation as a dirty fighter, but this was a time where it was refereed very technically. You don't get many draws and many disqualifications nowadays unless you get sort of persistent foul play. So, but back at this time, a single blow below the belt could get you a disqualification.
That's actually fascinating, because you get points deducted now.
Yeah, so there's a lot more emphasis put on defeats nowadays. Like, boxers like to go through, especially top boxers don't like defeats at all.
Mm. Yeah, well, it can break a career, can't it? Whereas,
yeah, back in the day, you'd end up with boxers who they fought a lot more. They'd end up with like 100 fights, 70 wins, 10 draws, and 20 losses, something like that at the end of the career, and that was considered a extremely good career.
It sounds it as well, to be fair.
Yeah, I mean, certainly be brave.
Mm-hmm.
So he was popular in England. As I mentioned, his style suited the English desires. He was technical, brave, and solid. The Dutch preferred a more aggressive approach. Journalists from the magazine Boxing called Leen a master in the art of avoiding punishment. The only criticism of him at this point was that he was stocky and sturdy, and the thought was that he could do with losing a few pounds to be a bit nimbler. But as it happened, his success in his career seemed to trend with him gaining weight, not losing weight, so bulking up as opposed to getting skinnier. So he was proud to represent the Netherlands, but he never hid his Jewish identity. In fact, he wore a Star of David on his boxing shorts, just as his hero Benny Leonard did. He was earning about £50 a purse in England at the time, which is about $2,500 today. So not bad money at all. He was offered his first European title shot quite early in his career, but was later withdrawn a month later without reason, motivating him to take on a risky high-profile match, and that was against a highly rated German boxer called Gustav Eder in March 1929 in Berlin. So Leen was announced to the crowd in Germany as Leen from Tulipland.
Right, that's stereotyping, but sure. Not inaccurate, I guess.
No.
This was in Germany in the 30s, did you say?
1929.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
about the end of the golden period of Germany before the Depression hit, and
then issues arose. Yeah,
things changed, which we will come to. So the fight itself, the first 2 rounds, quite balanced, but Leen landed a strong blow in the third, opening a cut on Ada's face with a left hook, which was one of his strengths. He showed all his counter-punching skills, using his left well and keeping his opponent at bay. It went all the way the bout, both boxers displaying their very fine skills, but Leen was a clear winner by decision, and was agreed by everyone watching to be the clear winner. A journalist from the German boxing publication Boxsport said Leen won hands down, but there was one journalist present at that fight that would see Leen again many years later with fateful consequences. But more on that later.
Mate, you love a carrot.
There's a big carrot, that one.
You're like Hansel and Gretel with your stories.
There you go. There's your first crumb. So later in 1929, the Great Depression had hit. Criminality was on the up. Living conditions were down in Rotterdam. Leen's career, though, was on the up. He was now the Dutch lightweight champion, having won the title in November 1929, and he had a big fight lined up against his old Dutch amateur teammate and 1928 Olympic champion by this point, Bert van Klaveren, in February 1930. It was a big gamble for Leen. Bert was considered a bear boxer and had also been successful as a pro. His lightweight title was on the line, but more than that, a likely shot at a European title if he won. So it was a massive fight. The best offensive fighter in Holland in Bep versus the best defensive fighter in Leen. The Dutch crowd obviously preferred Bep's style because he was more aggressive, but both fighters are very well respected, and it was a 15-round contest, as they often were back in the day. Tentative fight. Leen got more aggressive from round 3. Bep came back strongly in round 7. He caught Bep with a strong left in round 9, opening a cut on his eye, blinding him in that eye. Bep was cleaned up and stitched up, but to the crowd's relief he continued. His eye swelled up, but the fight went to the full distance, with both fighters putting in good effort in the final rounds.
Sorry, that's mental, because that would get a fight called off in the modern day if you went blind in one eye and your eyes shut.
He got stitched up.
Yeah, crazy.
And then the fight continued.
Crazy.
Yeah, it's crazy. Anyway, the decision was that Bep won on points. It was a very close fight. Both boxers got a standing ovation. It was a match easily of international standard. Some called it the best Dutch boxing match ever. They had a rematch a year later. Leen upped his game, but not quite enough to win. The match ending as a draw, so Bep obviously retained his title. As good as his performances were, it was a huge blow for Leen not to get the win against Bep. His chance at European title had gone, for now. His private life was getting better, though. At the age of 24, he married Selina, known as Selly, in a traditional service at the Rotterdam Great Synagogue. In the next few years, they had 2 children. First, Joshua, known as Jopie, followed by David. So Jopie and David.
I like Jopie. That's a good name.
Jopie's a great name, yeah, it's lovely. By 1932, he's considered one of the best welterweights in Europe, and he's angling again for European title shot, but he keeps getting knocked back. He carries on fighting in Germany, but by this time, the country was beginning to change. Journalists who'd praised his style and technique just 3 years before, when he defeated Gustav Eder, now seem cooler to the man wearing Star of David on his shorts for some reason. Even when he boxes with swastika-wearing Nazis in the front row, and when he defeats Aryans in front of them, which they didn't particularly like.
That's strange. I wonder why that was. Maybe there had been a political adjustment in Germany.
Yeah. So in 1932, he fought a staunch communist and anti-Nazi called Owen Volkmar in Rotterdam, winning on points. On the 20th of April 1933, Volkmar went to a cafe in Berlin. He was due to box the following day, so he was staying sober, but was interrupted by a group of drunken Nazi SA members who had been celebrating Hitler's birthday and were looking for some commies or Jews to fight. They picked the wrong guy, as Volkmar defended himself with hook stabs and kidney punches, leaving multiple Nazis on the floor struggling to breathe. An SA man then drew a pistol and shot Volkmar dead.
Jesus, I thought that was going to be a fun story. Fuck.
He died the following day, and he became the first sportsman to be killed by the Nazis.
That's mad.
Yeah.
And a tragedy, should I say. Not that it needs saying.
Yeah, well, first of many. Having made the NSDAP the biggest party in 2 1932 elections, there were 2 more to follow the following year. One where Nazi violence and harassment saw them increase their vote share, and a second in November of 1933 where there was only one party on the ballot. The Germans adored boxing and saw it as being a vital cog in building young people fit and ready to fight. Adolf Hitler went as far as suggesting that had previous heads of state invested more in boxing, the defeat in World War I and the 1919 revolution could have been avoided. Which is a bold statement.
was going to say, not sure what the jab would have done in the Somme.
No.
But fair enough, Adolf. You had your ideology.
So the early 1930s had seen a rise in a couple of prominent boxers, detested by the new regime, shall we say. Actually, a few of them. Firstly, a Berliner Jew and former sparring partner of Lane's, Harry Stein. He beat racially pure, as they would have put it, Paul Nowak to win the German featherweight title. Another Jewish-German boxer, Eric Seelig, became German middleweight champion in 1931 and light heavyweight champion in 1933, before being stripped of his title and told if he dared to fight again he'd be killed. He fled to France and later to the USA, where he carried on fighting, married a former Olympic standard hurdler called Greta, who would have been a member of the 1936 Olympic team, except for the fact she was Jewish, and they lived in New Jersey until his death in 1984. Greta died in 2008.
Ah, that's a nice little tangent. That's more uplifting.
Yeah.
I like that one.
Yeah, there's not too many of them that have a happy ending.
No, I know.
I have more stories, don't worry.
I don't doubt it.
So around that same time saw the rise of another boxer in Germany, a man named Johann Trollmann, a popular, entertaining and handsome fighter from a Sinto background, categorised as a gypsy by the new regime. Trollmann had been another sparring partner of Lane's and had made waves in June 1933 when fighting Adolf Witt for the German light heavyweight title, the one that Eric Seelig had vacated when he was forced to leave the country. The Nazis were very keen to get the belt around an Aryan waist, now its Jewish erstwhile holder had fled the country, and were horrified when Trollmann dominated the early rounds, causing Nazi officials to step in to try and stop the fight, only to relent in the face of a near rioting crowd, who stopped them from even forcing a no decision, meaning the referee had to give the correct decision and award the belt to Trollmann. To the Nazis, a gypsy had just beaten an Aryan to the title, a Jew had just beaten another Aryan to win just months before. That whole master race thing's not looking so good now, eh, lads?
That's yeah.
But guess what happened next?
I was going to say we're probably at the peak of the wave, though, in terms of the fun aspects to this.
Yeah, you got to take your fun where you can get it. So 6 days after the match, Trollmann received a letter to say he'd been stripped of the title for, get this, un-German boxing on account of his showboating, constantly winking and blowing kisses to women in the crowd and winding up opponents, for his unorthodox and dynamic style, not simply lining up opposite his opponent with perfect fundamentals and form. I mean, it's pathetic. I know this pales into insignificance in the grand scheme of Nazi things, but how can you have any self-respect or respect for your cause if that's the length you have to go to seem like the best? It's so weak and
it's reminiscent of like a 5-year-old saying like my house.
Oh God, exactly.
My house, my rules kind of thing. You know, like
it's so childish,
but also after the fact. So it's not even like, yeah, I don't know. We all know this is stupid shit.
Yeah, I know. It's like when I used to coach my kids at football and they used to cheat to win warm-up games and stuff like that. It's like, grow out of that eventually.
If it wasn't so serious, it would actually be amusing. But unfortunately, it's quite serious.
Oh, God. It's just what happens. Absolute power and weak egos. Anyway, it gets worse. Trollmann was allowed to fight in Berlin, but was severely pressured by Nazi authorities to fight in a quote-unquote German way. He rose to this request in the best possible manner, and you will like this. His opponent on this day was none other than Gustav Eder, who Leen Sanders himself had beaten 4 years earlier in very different times. Eder by then was one of the most popular boxers in Germany and a darling of the regime, described as the pillar of German boxing. When Trollmann entered the ring, he did so with his face powdered white, his hair dyed blonde, and he took on his opponent in an over-the-top caricature of a boxer fighting the German way. He knew he wasn't there to win. He kept up the act for a few rounds before reverting to his old routine, dancing, winding Eder up and playing up to the crowd. In the final round, Trollmann went down, with the crowd suspecting it wasn't because of Eder's punches. In either case, it was a very courageous denouncement of the Nazis in public in 1933. Had it been a few years later, it may have cost him his life there and then, but they allowed him to keep boxing for a short period, on the condition he lose all his matches, which he mostly did, until his license was finally revoked in 1935, on racial grounds, with no subtlety about it at all, and he was forced to make a living at boxing fairs. A bit more on him later and how his story ends up, but yeah, I like that one.
Yeah, no. He sounds like a interesting fella.
He was really interesting. You could do a whole episode on him or a whole segment on him. He obviously, his background was very, very different to even Leen Sanders, coming from a Sinti background, but he was also a very, very good-looking man. You can see pictures of him, and he was genuinely, hats off. He's a handsome guy. He was very popular, therefore, with lots of people for lots of different reasons, and he was an entertaining fighter. So, yeah, definitely worth a study, Johan Trollman.
That was going to be the observation I was going to make as well, mate. It's like boxing is a sport that's synonymous with personalities and characters and entertainers.
Absolutely.
And it's just really interesting to observe, through my ears, weirdly, of you telling this story, like how that's been the case, forever, really. As soon as there was any kind of formality to it, that was always part of its DNA and its makeup. That's just quite interesting.
Yeah, there's lots of different ways you can go about winning. One of those is to get in your opponent's head, as probably what a lot of people believe quite fairly is the greatest sportsman of all time, and Muhammad Ali used to do on a regular basis.
Oh, indeed. The master of it.
Yeah.
Well, master of every aspect, really. But another day for Muhammad Ali.
Definitely. And there will be other days. So Ada went on to win the European welterweight title, further enamouring him to the Nazis. Speculation was growing as to who his next challenger would be. Speculation that reached the Netherlands.
Our protagonist is back.
So at this point, back in the Netherlands, for those in the know, Leen remained a technically and tactically brilliant boxer, but he was less popular with the masses than the likes of the brawling Bep van Klaveren. So between these two facts, essentially, he struggled to find consistent opponents in the Netherlands, with ambitious fighters keen to avoid him because he was too good, and profiteering promoters preferring other options who were more naturally entertaining to the public in general. Leen supplemented his income with coaching at that point. He still fought abroad quite a lot, in Belgium and England mostly. He kept pushing for a European title shot in between times he defended his Dutch middleweight title, which he'd given up his Dutch welterweight title for, as I mentioned, gaining weight, gaining muscle mass as he did. He coached a lot of Jewish boxers, naturally, teaching them his double defense and lots of defensive techniques, which will come in very handy over the next few years for various reasons. Despite it all, he remained one of the best options for Ada to defend his title against, on paper at least. Negotiations were started with Ada's management, but the fees requested and money offered to Leen by Ada's team were just ridiculous for what was expected at the time. Suspiciously ridiculous for what was expected. Speculation was made potential reasons for that. I'm sure you can speculate yourself. Perhaps Ada feared the only man to ever comfortably defeat him, or maybe it's that Ada couldn't risk his reputation in Nazi Germany for fighting against a Jewish boxer. Couldn't take that risk.
Well, it's also pretty predictable, though, to be fair.
Yeah.
Without making a case for him. He had a lot to lose.
He did, but surely that's the point of the game. This is why I don't think it should be taken out of the boxer's hands entirely, but nevertheless.
Yeah. Well, I mean, in a purely sporting sense.
In a perfect world,
yeah.
So Leen managed to secure himself a big fight against Frenchman Victor Dijkman in Paris, and he won, raising his status even more. He wrote to the International Boxing Union to challenge Ada formally, and they accepted and stated that Ada must defend his title against Sanders, which is good. The fight couldn't be held in Rotterdam because there was no suitably large venue. Germany wasn't an option for Leen Sanders in 1936, for obvious reasons. Sanders and his team suggested Paris as a neutral venue, where he was also now well known since his fight with Dijkman. It was an opportunity in Paris for sort of both sides and organisers to stand to make a lot of money from the fight, which was obviously beneficial, and yet Ada's team still refused, and they demanded the fight be held in one place and one place only, and that was Germany. Leen refused to fight in Nazi Germany. It wasn't a question of safety. In 1936, Germany was opening its arms to people, to the world, at least in public, with the 1936 Olympics.
Yeah.
Obviously, welcoming people of all sorts and getting beaten thoroughly by people of all sorts.
Jesse Owens.
At that point. Jesse Owens, of course, who may well get mentioned later in this story.
Nice.
Indirectly. So this Olympic veneer was in show. Leen's reason for refusing to fight there was it was a protest against the Nazis. Simple as that. He was strongly backed by many anti-Nazi groups for his stand, and they were hopeful that would inspire others to boycott the Olympics. Rather than risk fighting elsewhere, Ada took a boat to the United States and had his title rescinded instead. Sanders was given a fight against Belgian Felix Wouters, a talented fighter he'd fought twice in the past year, winning once and losing once in that time. The match was fought 4 days before the Olympics started. It was held in Brussels. Wouters was 15 centimetres taller and the favourite. It was a close battle, but it was the Belgian that ended up coming up on points. It was probably the pinnacle of Leen's professional career, and he missed the Continental title by just a few points. Sad.
Yeah, that is sad. But I mean, you don't have to be a world champion, a European champion, a continental champion to have had an admirable and successful career. So
absolutely.
Whilst it's a shame he didn't win something, it sounds as though this guy had a colourful pro career that he can be, that anyone would be proud of. I was going to say he could be proud of. It's not really, he doesn't need my endorsement. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, indeed. And it was also, should be mentioned, far from the last fight of his career for various reasons. And even more reasons if you were to widen the definition of the word fight.
This is more of your breadcrumbs.
We're not even, we haven't even begun this story yet. So, by 1939, Lane's career had cooled off a bit. He was still Dutch middleweight champion, although there was only occasional challengers who were all soundly beaten. He was still coaching. He joined the Dutch Army at this point, or Dutch Army Reserve, I should say, with the threat of war on the horizon. The world was on the brink in 1939. Tension was growing in the Netherlands. Dutch National Socialists, known as the NSB, they were growing in number, and they frequently clashed with left-wing groups and Jews. On several occasions, NSB members chose the wrong Jews to harass, with the young boxers, many of which Lane had coached, answering insults with hooks and uppercuts. One time, Jewish champion boxer Benny Bloom was walking a fellow boxer and a wrestler when a single member of the NSB decided to try and push them off the pavement. It did not end well for him when he was thrown through a shop window.
Through a shop window, blimey.
Yeah. When the war came, Lane and thousands of others were called up for the still neutral Dutch army, fearing invasion from the Germans. In the quiet early days of the war, they trained, and Lane was promoted to corporal. He sparred and trained other soldiers in boxing at that time. He tried to stay fit and ready to fight, just in case a chance to fight came. Bert van Klaveren at this point had fled to the United States, so when it came to boosting army morale, the brass turned to Lane to organise a boxing match for his middleweight title belt against a young boxer called Hans Dekkers. He won comfortably. He was immediately challenged by a 19-year-old Luc Van Dam, who was described as the next coming of Bep. He won that fight comfortably, and then he beat another up-and-coming fighter before beating a fascist Italian boxer. The Italians were still neutral just about at this point. He was making more money at this point than ever before. His career was back up and running, and it only took the war to do it. A fifth fight and another defence of his middleweight title was scheduled for May the 15th, 1940. The match never happened. And that's because on 10th of May 1940, Blitzkrieg arrived in the Netherlands. On the 14th of May, Stukers and Heinkels hammered Rotterdam. Paratroopers fell. People hid wherever they could. 884 civilians were killed. Lane and his unit were attacked. Some died, but most, including Lane, were captured and made prisoners of war. The Netherlands capitulated against the German onslaught. But Lane and many others from his unit managed to escape captivity and made their way back to what was left of their homes.
I was going to say Rotterdam was absolutely battered in World War II when the Germans invaded them.
Absolutely battered. Really was.
With it being a port city and all that as well. So strategic and relevance and importance.
I mean, whether it was a necessity or not to do so, I'm not a military historian. I wouldn't want to speculate, but it seems...
I don't think it would have been necessary to trash the city. I think that's just the reason that they went so hard on it.
I'm not sure over 1,000 Dutch deaths, including armed forces, was necessary, but... Nevertheless, it was only one country that was ever going to win that particular battle.
Mm-hmm.
So immediately after the Dutch surrender, the Germans tried to ingratiate themselves, I guess, with the local population. Part of those efforts included putting sporting events on, and one of those things was a boxing match. So Lane had already fought Luc Van Dam, obviously had beaten him. In 1940, another boxing match was put on by the German authorities, or by the Dutch authorities, who are puppets of the Germans now. Against Luc Van Dam. His two sons were present at the fight, now aged 8 and 6, and both of them wanting to be boxers, just like their dad. Lane was ready. He looked no different from normal in the early rounds, despite having no Star of David on his shorts, was the only major difference. He dominated the first 8 rounds, and then defended well for the remainder, save the last where he came out swinging again. Van Dam barely stayed on his feet in that last round, and showed, honestly, great heart to stay on his feet towards the end. As the gong went, fans applauded, and his young opponent congratulated him on his victory. His sons came into the ring and were lifted up by him. For a moment, everything was perfect. Until the announcer announced the result of the match.
Oh.
So, after 6 years holding the belt, Lane had lost his title. Boos came in, a chair was thrown towards the ring, the perpetrator immediately getting arrested. Lane was shocked, then he was angry. No one agreed with the decision. No one said out loud why this Jewish boxer lost in Nazi-occupied Netherlands. It was later revealed, though, after the war that a Nazi officer had ordered the outcome. No surprise there.
Yeah, I mean, that was probably the easiest thing to guess.
Yeah. Well, with his boxing career basically done for, Leen began helping out the resistance instead. A new fight on his hands. He was copying and handing out flyers that countered German propaganda. If he was caught, it would be a one-way trip to Dachau, or worse, they might just use a bullet on him. But he did his part anyway around boxing training. So at the start of 1941, all residents began requiring identity cards with Jewish cards stamped with a J. Leen continued with his resistance work, delivering forged identity cards with the J's removed. Anti-Jewish regulations tightened, restricting where Jews could work, shop and take part in recreation. Yopi and David had to leave their Dutch school with the usual nonsensical excuses of Jewish kids being a distraction for Christian kids, cultural differences, whatever else it might be. At this time, they were pretending everything was for the greater good, not just being outright clear about their intentions. Graffiti started appearing on walls, windows were smashed, Christian neighbours stopped speaking to Jewish friends. These regulations were policed by a feared Dutch inspector called Tinus Ozendarp, who was most famous for winning bronze medals in the 100 and 200 metres at the 1936 Olympics, behind African-Americans Ralph Metcalfe and Mac Robinson in silver, and obviously Jesse Owens, who got the gold in both.
That's wild. So he must have an incredible PR, man.
He became a Jew hunter, essentially.
But he's remembered for his gold medal, his silver medals. It's like, Jesus Christ, like, how's your PR?
Must be pretty good. Yeah, big fan of the Fuhrer, even in 1936, apparently. So, as I say, now he's the biggest enemy that Jews have in the Netherlands. His men allow NSB members to burn synagogues, raid homes for jewellery. Luc Van Dam, the man who Leen beat once and should have beaten twice, later beat Gustav Eder in The Hague. Leen was not welcome at the match, nor any other Jews. Van Dam won, another case of what might have been for Leen had Eder been brave enough to face him 5 years earlier. So yeah, it's all going a bit downhill, really.
Yeah, well, I felt like that was the trajectory.
Yeah,
fairly early on. I mean, I read between your lines with the breadcrumbs.
I'm not going to say it gets any better, Ben.
No, I don't anticipate it does. You're fast getting yourself a reputation for the more macabre stories of sporting history.
There's almost no point of this story where I can't say there's still more. There's so much more of this story. It's honestly incredible, and I will thoroughly recommend the book when we're done to fill in the gaps, because there's so much more to it, obviously, as I move through this quickly.
Yeah.
In 1942, letters started arriving. Jews now wearing yellow stars to identify themselves started getting letters to tell them they would be getting relocated to fill crucial jobs in Germany. Some of Leen's siblings received their letters first, then some other siblings and friends, then his parents. They were all told to assemble at a Rotterdam warehouse with a single bag per person. Everyone is terrified, most of all, of ending up in Mauthausen concentration camps. Many Jews taken there have been reported dead since, some deaths being labelled as, and I quote, suicide by walking into the electric fence.
That's grim. That's grim, yeah.
It tells you everything you need to know. There is very little contact to be had with people once they've left. For Leen and his family, there was only one option. They had to go into hiding. They did go into hiding with a local family, but they were betrayed, unfortunately. Him and his family were taken to a detention centre, along with Dutch resistance members. The Dutch resistance members were occasionally removed from the facility, dragged away to receive a bullet in the head. Eventually, they were all loaded onto a train, taken to Westerbork transit camp near Drenthe in the Netherlands. The threat of being sent east there is very real and very permanent. Their valuables are all removed at this point from them. They were assigned berths of multiple people to each lice-ridden bed. Transport lists are read out daily, and those listed on those transport lists are then loaded into goods trains and moved on to destinations on loan somewhere in the east. Eventually, the Sanders names are read, and they find themselves on the train. All pretense is now gone. Resistance is met with violence. The train heads across Germany, guarded by SS men with Alsatian dogs at each stop. Anyone who tries to escape, quickly shot, quickly rounded up, chased down. Some do try and escape. Some actually even manage it, at least manage to get out of the general area, although what becomes of them is largely unknown. The guards became even stricter as a result of that. Food is limited, as is water. Those being transported are forced to try and melt snow from the top of the train to try and get some water. When they finally arrive, it's cold. There's a large red brick building in front of them. Prisoners are wearing striped uniforms. They line up, and SS doctors go down the line asking information from the prisoners. Age, fitness. They're sending stronger prisoners right, and they're sending older, young, most women over the age of 30, and children left. Celia is 32. This is Auschwitz, and Leen is sent right. Selly, Yopi, and David go left.
That's fucking horrible.
That's it. Just like that.
Yeah, that's fucking horrible. Can we?
I mean,
can we carry on and not dwell too long on the gassing of?
Yeah, I mean, obviously we've been to Auschwitz ourselves. Obviously, if anyone hasn't been, firstly, I'd recommend Krakow as a lovely place to visit.
Very lovely.
On a happier note, but
yeah, very lovely.
But it is very worth a visit there. It's very hard to comprehend what 1 million people's lives look like. Yeah,
the scale is
just Auschwitz alone. Obviously,
is shocking. It's shocking. Yeah, wholeheartedly endorse that.
What millions of lives look like. So on arrival at Auschwitz, Leen is given the camp number 86764 tattooed on his arm, alongside a triangle showing he's Jewish. He's disinfected, given a badly fitting uniform, has his head shaved. An SS guard there spots his cauliflower ear and asks him if he was a boxer. Leen replies yes, and the guard seems pleased, but that's all that comes of it for now. He's taken to his block. Each block is led by a block leader. They keep control in return for extra food and privilege, and they're called capos. Food is scarce, so extra food is definitely worth a lot. Prisoners are crammed 2 or 3 into each lice-ridden bed, so extra privileges are definitely worth a lot. A week after his arrival, he finds out for sure that his family were dead. A lot of people at this point would lose their minds entirely. A lot of people did lose their minds entirely. But Leen just got on with it, as far as can be told. At Auschwitz, you were given work details, and outdoor work details could be deadly. These were sarcastically described as suicide squads, and prisoners assigned to them were lucky to last a few weeks before they collapsed from exhaustion, received a bullet, or a one-way trip to the gas chambers. This included working coal mines, construction of new buildings, all in freezing winter conditions in Poland. Lice or disease could be equally fatal. Every so often, gas commissions went round, picking out the weakest prisoners for the gas chambers, and those with illnesses or excessive lice or any skin conditions were often the first to go. Leen's chances of survival were very, very slim, until something very incredible happened. The guard who spotted his ear called him out. Having realised, first of all, that he wasn't about to get shot, which was his first reaction, Leen was shocked when the guard told him that he had been a journalist when he fought Gustav Adolf in 1929.
That guy?
Yeah, he said he recognised him as Leen from Tulipland, who'd beaten the great Adolf comfortably. He told Leen that he had to stay alive, so that he would arrange a better detail and more food for him. He kept his word, and soon he finds himself as one of the only Jews working in the SS laundry, which was a much better work detail. It was hard work. There was nothing like the suicide squads. It also allowed opportunity to quote-unquote organise things, which was the camp euphemism for stealing. Obviously, getting caught meant beatings. It meant death as a possibility, but even worse than that, punishment cells existed where prisoners were left in a space too tight to sit down, and multiple prisoners were often crammed in there as well, often until death, with the bodies being left in there, even while others were still alive in there, and we've obviously seen them at Auschwitz itself. Pretty grim set of circumstances.
Yeah, and I know we're focusing on, this pretty extraordinary story of this boxer, but if there was ever a microcosm of the complexity of human beings, then it's probably personified quite nicely by that guard.
Yeah.
Like, he's a Nazi guard at Auschwitz, of all places, showing compassion to a Jewish Dutch boxer that he met or saw once for no reason other than the fact that he admired his sporting capability, but yet he's still a guard at Auschwitz. Make that make sense?
Well, I'll make it make sense for you.
Okay.
The guards themselves were scrambling for position and for prestige within the camp. There wasn't that many guards at the camp, so being the favourite of the camp commandant would make a big difference. And one way you could get the favour of the camp authorities was to bring them a great boxer and provide some entertainment for them. So that'll make you feel better.
So he wasn't...
He was just another...
Yeah, he wasn't showing much self-serving. Yeah, okay.
I mean, he was in the SS, Ben. It would take a lot to redeem him.
Yes, good point. Well made.
So there was two... It doesn't get any better. There was 2 types of sport at Auschwitz. One was for entertainment, between guards or for guards, or for capos to enjoy, or for prisoners in better positions to enjoy. Wrestling and boxing were popular spectator sports. There was also football. There was a football pitch there too. The second type of sport at Auschwitz was for punishment, forcing exercise upon prisoners to the point they fell dead. So yeah, 2 types of sport.
Yeah.
All types of political prisoners were at the camp, mostly Poles, who were the first to arrive at the camp. Boxing matches were hugely popular, and they were originally set up with the Polish prisoners, between capos and regular prisoners there. Guards demanded high standards in the matches. At any point, there could be a prestigious visitor turning up. Goebbels or Himmler could turn up at any point, and they had to be able to provide the right amount of entertainment. Obviously, these things are very important things to consider in your death camp. It gave an opportunity as a result for prisoners to gain some serious rewards if they were a talented boxer. But there was incredible risk to that too. There was a gladiatorial aspect to it.
Who are they fighting for, mate? Like, sorry, as in not for. Obviously, they're fighting for themselves and their own survival in the simplest sense. But are they fighting for the guards' entertainment or the entertainment of the inmates?
Sort of a bit of both. So obviously, if you are a prisoner in a privileged position, so the doctors in the camp, other boxers, that kind of thing, people that make the guards' lives better or more useful, maybe certain political prisoners who are more favoured by the guards as opposed to the many Jews who were there, people in a particular position, and the capos, obviously the people who ran the place. Anyone with a privilege, it was a reward to you, an incentive for you to toe the line, and that meant that they could have less guards at the camp because the prisoners essentially police themselves as a result of that, due to these incentives of food and entertainment and a better lifestyle. But it was also for the guards and potentially for any visitors or dignitaries who happened to be visiting as well. So that was essentially it.
Okay, yeah. No, I was just wondering, because when you said that that's what you need at your death camp, I was thinking like, what? So like, make sure people don't die bored. But but that's not really.
There was this crazy side to it in that it was a camp which was filled with violence without rules. A guard could come up to anyone at any point and essentially they could beat them to death, and there was no consequences to it.
Yeah.
Boxing was extremely violent, but there was rules to it. It was this weird thing that the entertainment was actually just adding more rules to what was going on in the normal world. But, I mean, beyond that, there was also, as I mentioned, there was a gladiatorial aspect to it. If you lose too badly, you could risk getting the Auschwitz equivalent of a thumbs down. You could end up losing your life. You can end up with a bullet in your head or end up being sent to the gas chambers. Getting an injury as well could be the same.
Yeah, being so seriously injured as to be incapacitated, in which case you're useless and then you're definitely being killed.
The one thing you couldn't afford to be is useless at Auschwitz, because the vast majority of prisoners there, unfortunately, had no use to the guards and they were used up, or very limited use. Obviously, they were working, but they were just used up and killed or left to die where they fell or whatever else. It was barbaric.
The boxing has gone back to almost like its origins of there being like no real winner, and it's actually about survival. Don't quit and don't die. Basically,
that's pretty much it.
Yeah. That's
and if you've got,
I don't know,
if you've got any heart to you at all, don't kill your opponent either.
Yeah.
Don't knock them out. Yeah. Don't beat them too badly.
It's very thought-provoking, that. But yeah, sorry, carry on. I know there's more to come.
Yeah. So SS officers made bets on the outcome as well, meaning even winning could be dangerous if the wrong person lost money. And fights were mostly fought barefist or with light gloves as well. The biggest name at the time in Auschwitz boxing was a man named Teddy Pietrzykowski, who was a Polish fighter who I'll come to shortly. So Leen had another piece of luck at this time where he made friends with a kitchen storeroom capo. It's called Kasik. Kasik approached him and asked him for coaching because he was a boxer too, although not as successful one as Leen, obviously. Leen taught him defensive techniques, and Kasik in response provided Leen with extra rations, which allowed him to survive, but also allowed him to start taking food to other prisoners. Leen was able to get in good boxing shape, but the risk was always there. Prisoners were regularly hung in front of everyone for stealing or for disobedience, and obviously that was what Leen was doing, stealing food essentially for other prisoners. Some bodies were even nailed up as a warning to others, and 7 prisoners who were caught one Christmas breaking into the kitchen storeroom were given a bullet to the head, and some were placed under the camp Christmas tree as a warning to others.
That's mental. But
that's fucking hell.
Yeah, it's a worst place imaginable.
It really is.
Yeah.
So Leen continues training prisoners. He gains his own conditions. SS guards watch him, and inevitably they ask him to fight. He considers this, he considers the risks and the benefits, and he decides to take the challenge on, as much for his own sanity as everything. Pietrzykowski versus Sanders was on. Teddy Pietrzykowski, as I mentioned, he was a former Polish army officer. who's come from a privileged background. He'd fought for the Polish army against Nazis before joining the resistance, where he was later captured. He was prisoner number 77 at Auschwitz and was in a bad state before he was asked to box there, which at this point was a year or two earlier. His first fight at that point was against much heavier and feared Capo, a German who was prisoner number 1, funnily enough. Struggling with his fitness, he tried to get a quick win, tried to knock him out quickly. He gained the upper hand, and he eventually did win the match by a stoppage. He immediately found his position improved. He was given more food, he was given time to train. He beat all comers to become what was known as the all-weight champion of Auschwitz, despite one occasion where an SS doctor deliberately injected him with typhus after the doctor had lost a bet on him. It's just mental. It's incredible.
Yeah. Incredible is a good word for it.
Yeah,
unimaginable, really.
This is what power without control does.
Unless it was if it hadn't have been documented as thoroughly as it was, you wouldn't believe half the stories that come out of that place.
Oh, more than half, yeah.
It's insane.
Yeah, Teddy, by this point, he'd won 38 out of 39 matches with 1 draw and no defeats. He was a celebrity, as much as Auschwitz could have them, and he had the privilege that came with it. Bets were made on the match. Teddy is obviously naturally the favourite, but Lane's reputation is big, and it meant that more money was bet on that fight than ever before. Kasich served as Lane's second, and the match was close, which was actually unlike most of Teddy's bouts before that, which immediately got the crowd's attention. Lane even edged some of the earlier rounds. Teddy then managed to get himself on top, and he got on the front foot with controlled aggression. Lane had never been knocked out before, but now he's at risk, and it could be fatal if he was. He withdraws strongly into his double defence and tries to ride the storm. But suddenly, Lane countered, and he struck with speed, catching Teddy with his trademark left hook, sending Teddy down to the canvas. The crowd was shocked. They'd never seen Teddy get knocked down before in all his fights before. The ref started counting.
This is insane. What's the weight difference?
There's a height difference between them. I don't think there's that much of a weight difference, actually. I think Teddy is slightly bigger, but I don't think it's a huge difference. Teddy was also renowned for his cunning fighting and his defensive technique. He was a well-respected fighter for his style, which made this a very, very good fight for the purists.
Yeah.
But a lot of the SS guards were just baying for blood, and one of them just started throwing punches. And they just weren't doing it. They were boxing properly. It was an international standard boxing match, essentially.
They wanted to see it like a street brawl, and what they got was a high quality boxing match. Okay. So anyway, so this guy's he's nearly sparked. He's down.
Yeah, Teddy's down, but ref started counting, but Teddy did pick himself up. The SS guards were baying for Lane to finish him off at this point, but Lane didn't. He controlled the final rounds, he saw out the match, he knew even a champion like Teddy wouldn't be safe if the SS considered him washed up. So he didn't knock him out. Lane took the win on decision, the first defeat by Teddy, and he secured his status in the camp and his status as the all-weight Auschwitz champion.
That's cool.
It's mad. It's mad that that's even a thing, but also it is genuinely cool.
Yeah, I mean, it's... I don't know. You got to try and find like the silver linings, don't you? And
I mean, it's a great sporting story within what is ultimately madness.
Yeah.
What is unimaginable
and
what can hardly be perceived.
Given he only had national title before this.
Yeah.
Like it's, I don't know. It means something, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, it has meaning. I don't really know what I'm trying to say, but I think we all feel it.
Yeah. Anyway, so his improved position meant he was essentially now a capo. Put in a position where he was in control of supplies, in control of, had more access to food, and he used that. A lot of capos would just be solely interested in their own survival, but Lane wasn't. He used his position to help people. He used his position to secure food, medical supplies for fellow prisoners. This included medical cases that would have been a definite gas commission if it wasn't for the extra rations he brought. He also provided food for female prisoners in the dreaded experiments block. That's Mengele. That's some horrible, horrible things which I'm not even going to go into going on in there.
Yeah.
It's a disgraceful part of this story amongst disgrace everywhere. And food for fellow Dutch prisoners as well in the main part of the camp. Getting caught at best meant a beating. At worst it meant death, and he was caught several times and he was beaten several times. But he managed to avoid any worse punishment. He kept coaching, but on Kasich's advice, he stopped fighting in the knowledge that the SS just wouldn't allow a Jewish champion to stay for so long. So he gave up the belt to stop fighting and concentrate on coaching, but he kept his privileged position. People around him continued to be beaten and killed, but he always tried to help people when he could. On several occasions, he smuggled people out of infirmaries or hid people showing signs of weakness on the sheet in the laundry or elsewhere. Had he been caught doing that, he definitely would have been killed. That was one of the biggest crimes. The whole thing they were trying to do there was, ethnic cleansing essentially, and you trying to get in the way of that with your morals was always going to get you killed.
Yeah, there's not much time for morals in Auschwitz.
No. But he was credited by a lot of survivors being a huge part of their survival, both for the food provided and for the humanity that he showed, which was obviously so lacking. Prisoners got some wind of what was going on in the war. Rumours were heard about Warsaw being liberated. The Russians were heading their way. And then from January 1945, guns were heard in the distance. And prisoners, one day, were suddenly called into the roll call square. Food was brought out, and surprisingly, prisoners were told to take whatever they could carry. Leen was in decent condition at that point because of his privileged position, and that was something that was about to become very essential. Prisoners were brought together in temperatures 25 degrees below zero and told to march away from the camp. Occasionally, people tried to flee. They were shot. People falling behind were shot. Some people were shot for no apparent reason. The Russians at this point were already at Krakow, and at the pace they were going to catch the marchers, so breaks were rare, food was limited, prisoners were forced to march, and they became exhausted. Some fell from exhaustion. Some died frozen at the side of the road. Others were shot. Shoes fell apart. Some people ended up wearing rags on their feet, and the ones that limped to the back of the crowd were shot. Even stopping for a toilet break would get you shot. Prisoners were freezing. Boxers Leen had worked with and trained with, he watched get shot close up. Snow is stuffed into mouths for water. As time goes by, many marchers get diarrhea from the terrible food they're being given. Some chance going to relieve themselves, others don't. Many of both are shot. Despite it all, gallows humour and encouragement persists. Leen is credited with keeping spirits up, and eventually they get to a train, a cattle wagon. They were forced in upon each other. It is a release to get off their feet, but they are far from safe. They're taken to another camp. Conditions are brutal, almost feral. Food's almost non-existent. Beatings are common. Soup's about the best thing going, and it's thin and has very little meat in it. Illness and diarrhea is rife, and it's hell on earth. Prisoners are forced to stand in freezing conditions for no apparent reason for hours on end. The fear of being gassed is constant, and weeks later they're forced to flee again in another cattle wagon as the Russians again approach. Prisoners at this point need to fight for space and food. Leen helps keep order. He was described by many as a guardian angel. Dead bodies stay in the train. Some are used as pillows. That's all he can really do. They scrape snow from the roof of the car for water. The thirst is worse than the hunger. They see RAF planes flying over at this point on bombing raids. And after days travelling, they get to a new camp, Dachau, near Munich, which we have also been to.
We have.
Many have died along the way. Some have just disappeared, probably thrown out the train once they were dead. It's more of the same at Dachau. Hard work, torture, beatings, death. Finally, a group of prisoners are called out and removed from the camp. They realised they were all Jews. Rumours went around that they were all about to be shot. They were loaded into a cattle wagon. Rations were limited. The towns they passed through were in pieces from the bombing. They travel for days and days and days and stop and wait and travel again. Prisoners are let out for air. Suddenly, cheers come up and word gets round that the war is over. They get some food, some prisoners run off, but the rumours are confirmed to be false. Prisoners are chased down and led back to the train. Some are shot. Some of the prisoners that escape reach the nearby town centre and are gunned down in public. 52 people die, some prisoners, some locals. The train continues. They pass through bodies hanging by the sides of the tracks, local rebels who rose up against the Nazis who were being strung up as a message to others. They have to abandon the train at one point, briefly at times, due to aerial attacks by the Americans. The train breaks down. They wait. They wait amongst the dead and the living in the train wagons until a door slides open and an American voice shouts out, "Is everyone alive in there?" It was April the 30th, 1945. Hitler was dead, and Leen Sanders and many others, although not that many survivors in the train because a lot had died along the way, they are free.
That
mad
is insane.
There's your happy ending.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing he survived. Genuinely amazing. And that story is just remarkable. And boxing permeates throughout. Like, it's what kept him alive. It's what got him there, and it's what kept him alive. It's it's weird in that sense.
It's incredible. It's an incredible story. And I'd thoroughly recommend, I'll say the book in a couple of minutes, but I'd thoroughly recommend everyone does look into this more because I don't think it gets the recognition it does this particular story. It is more famous in the Netherlands, obviously, but
Sure.
there's a fantastic book on it, and I'll get to that. Anyway, there's a little bit more. There's one more fight.
Okay.
Well,
Yeah.
a bit more fighting to come. So it takes Leen a long time to recover physically. He fights in boxing matches twice against a fighter called Jan de Pauw. He wins both of them, but during both matches he has flashbacks to his time at Auschwitz, the first sign of what is clearly going to be a long struggle with PTSD. He retires for good at this point, and he remarries, and him and his new wife move to Aruba to start a new life.
What a great place to go and live.
It's not a bad place, but he vowed that he'd never return to Rotterdam again because there was just too many bad memories there. Bear in mind, as if it wasn't obvious from the story, his entire family, but for a few odd members here and there, had been killed, mostly at Auschwitz. Obviously his wife and his sons, but also his parents, siblings, cousins, aunts, uncles, and everyone he knew. He was one of the rare ones that survived. If you went to Auschwitz, you were 99 point, I don't know what the percentage is, but very, very likely to not make it out. But anyway, moved to Aruba. He had a son with his new wife, who he named for his late sons. He named Joshua David and called him Joe. He didn't mention his old family much to them. He didn't talk about his past at all. He started up as a boxing coach, but realised there wasn't enough business, so he bought a cafe instead, which he called Wintergarden. He was there for a few years, but business took a downturn, so him and his family moved to Los Angeles at that point, and he became an American citizen, which he needed to get a job at a school, because he got a job as a janitor at a school. And he also provided information at this time to the Auschwitz trials that were going on in writing, which was the first time he dragged up memories of what happened for a long time. He later started a cleaning company. He was financially stable for a while, but the effects of his life at Auschwitz caught up with him hard. He couldn't sleep without pills. His joints were affected by rheumatism. Life was a constant struggle, and the healthcare in America was very expensive, too expensive really for him to afford on his salary. So, as a result, he applied for a new extraordinary pension given by the Dutch government for people affected by resistance activities in the war. Essentially, anyone whose life was still being affected by resistance they did during the war was eligible for this pension. He applied, and he was rejected. They didn't believe resistance was possible in Auschwitz, was their first reason for rejecting.
Mate,
It gets worse.
yeah.
He didn't want to tell his story. He didn't want to raise the ghost, but he had to. He had no choice. He provided many letters and clippings from survivors backing his story. People whose lives he'd saved in Auschwitz had written letters on his behalf, saying that he risked his life, he took beatings, and he risked everything to keep people alive. He led fellow prisoners during the death march and train travel. He made sure everyone around him ate at the expense of his own health, and he treated people as human in this time. But the people making the decisions told him humanity alone wasn't enough. He needed to prove resistance. He had physicians on his side too. They still demanded more evidence and information. It took 19 months, and again, he was rejected. It was rejected again in 1986 when Leen was 78 and living in difficult circumstances with declining mental faculties. Him, his supporters, and the legal help that had volunteered to help him kept fighting. Superlatives were given again and again. More evidence was given. Tales were told of the will he had to survive, the will he had to help his fellow prisoners survive. He risked his life to extend the life of his fellow prisoners. What bigger resistance is there than that when you're in a place like Auschwitz? It was rejected.
That is... I thought we treated Alan Turing badly.
Yeah.
And we did. So let me...
Yeah.
But,
let's not...
Yeah,
let's not use this as a defense against our...
Yeah.
But yeah.
That is bureaucracy. Oh, yeah.
The ending of this is almost worse than everything else because in 1989, Leen had...
It's insulting. That's the word I was looking for. It's fucking insulting. Anyway.
Well, this is insulting. So in 1989, Leen had Alzheimer's. He was in a wheelchair living in a home. He was finally accepted for an extraordinary pension, but when it was explained to him, he didn't understand because he had Alzheimer's. He also didn't understand the apology that came with the acceptance, saying that he should have been accepted for it years ago. Though whether he'd accepted that apology or not is another matter. The money finally arrived in his account in 1992, including arrears, 2 days after he died.
Jesus Christ, that's a sad conclusion to what is a ridiculously good story. and homage to an extraordinarily interesting man.
Yeah, he had one request in his will, and his only request he made in his will was saying, "I want to be cremated. After all, they burnt my entire family."
Yeah.
Which is fucking heartbreaking.
Yeah, it is. But I mean, that's a man that lived 1 million lives in one life.
It's ridiculous. It's crazy, yeah. Never stopped fighting for something.
I mean, he's, to circle back to the very start of how he introduced this whole episode, he characterizes everything that we said is good about this sport, doesn't he? Like, he's courageous, heroic even. I mean, not even, like, is heroic.
Incredibly so.
Determined, empathetic, kind. Obviously, you've got the principles of a great man and the physical and mental attributes of, a good boxer.
He was a leader at a time when a leader was desperately needed. And the letters, obviously, I thoroughly recommend the book. So the book is The Fighter of Auschwitz by Eric Brouwer, and that's ErikBrouwer. And that's why I buried the lead. I didn't want to bury the lead a little bit. Oh, sorry, I chose to bury the lead a little bit.
Yeah.
The Fighter of Auschwitz is the title of the book, obviously.
Because it gives it away, yeah.
Gave the game away a little bit, but it's an extraordinary book, and it goes into more detail than I possibly could in the however long I've been talking for.
Yeah.
It is a wonderful book about a wonderful man, and I would thoroughly recommend it.
Yeah. Well, we're not trying to rehearse every detail of every story on this, are we? We're just trying to introduce people to interesting sporting stories on particular subjects week by week.
Send them on their way, yeah.
And yeah, hopefully that's at least, tickled some interest. I bet you're wondering how the fuck I'm going to get back to Usyk Dubois at the end of that story.
Well, before you do.
But I can do it. So when you're ready, you let me and I will do it.
Yeah. I've got a bit of an epilogue, actually, because I want to talk just really briefly about some of the other people I mentioned in that story and how their lives went on over after the war or during the war or whatever.
Yeah.
Just so you can compare and contrast a little bit. So I wasn't able to find much information on Gustav Ada during the war, so he might have been exempted from military service because of his fame, whatever. But yeah, he opened a bar in Berlin after the war, and he died in 1992, just 2 months before Leen, funnily enough.
Oh.
Johann Trollmann married his girlfriend Olga in 1935, soon after the birth of their daughter Rita. Shortly after that, an application was made for his forcible sterilization, which went to court and was unfortunately accepted, and the process was carried out. He was forced to join the army and served on the Eastern Front before being taken to Neuengamme concentration camp. Official records there show he died of a heart condition, but witnesses say he was made to box at the camp, knocked down a capo in a fight, and was then beaten to death by that capo as a result. One of what is believed to be 250 to 500,000 victims of the Sinti Roma section of the Holocaust. Yeah, so sorry about that. That's not a happy ending. Teddy Pietruchowski, though, was recognised by a German commandant of funnily enough, that concentration camp in 1943, and was invited to move there. So, some believing in the nick of time because his boxing success had angered a lot of guards and inmates, so he was in trouble. He continued boxing. He was undefeated in the new camp. He ended up at Bergen-Belsen, where he was liberated by the British in 1945. After the war, he testified against Auschwitz Commandant Rudolf Höss, who he'd once attempted an unsuccessful assassination attempt on. He briefly continued his boxing career before becoming a PE teacher and a boxing coach until his death in 1991. Bert van Klaveren served with the Dutch army during the war before moving to Australia. He then moved back to Rotterdam and carried on his boxing career at the age of 47, winning 11 of 12 fights but missing out on a European welterweight title in his final fight before retiring for good. He also died in 1992. They've all died within a few months of each other, these guys, funnily enough, other than, obviously, sadly, Trollmann. He died in Rotterdam. That same city unveiled a statue to him later that year, and also hosts the biggest boxing gala in the Netherlands in his name every year. So for Leen, there was no statue, no tournament, but there were grateful friends and fellow survivors and an incredible story. And there we go. And yes, that book again is The Fighter of Auschwitz by Eric Brouwer. So yeah, also available in audiobook form, as I enjoyed it.
Yeah, mate, it's super interesting. And it's nice, apart from, this Trollmann chap, that...
Yeah.
That everyone went on to live long, happy lives, hopefully, with the exception of some of the details that you provided about Leen. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Leen did what he could. He remarried. He moved with his family. He tried to build a life for them, but he was always haunted, obviously, by what happened. And I can't even imagine.
As you would be.
No one in this day and age, or very, very few people in this day and age, can imagine. It's just incredible.
No.
Shall we move on?
Yeah, I said I could get us back to Usyk Dubois.
I believe in you.
Do you want me to back up my words?
Here we go.
Yeah, so I think there's quite a few parallels with our hero from earlier, with Oleksandr Usyk. Not as extreme, but parallels nonetheless, because Usyk's from Crimea.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and had moved to Kiev by the time the annexation happened, but his family from Crimea. His mum and dad are actually originally from north and northeast Ukraine. Oh, and interestingly, but I should say, his wife has dual citizenship. She's also got Russian citizenship, just to thicken the plot. And when the Ukraine war broke out and Russians invaded Ukraine, he joined the Ukrainian Territorial Defense Forces with Lomachenko and I think a couple of other famous people and some MMA fighters potentially. Obviously, the Klitschko, Vitaly's mayor of Kiev, isn't he?
Yes.
They were obviously also, involved in the resistance and stuff, but he fought and patrolled Kiev when the Russians were on the outskirts and defended his city. And he only recommenced his boxing career when he met people on the front line who said that he should use his profile basically to raise awareness internationally, and keep Ukraine in the news effectively. And
fair enough.
He agreed to do so, and that's how he got back into boxing. So, there is a link there. And yeah, he's obviously a person that shares some of the values we were just talking about, albeit, in a slightly, who am I to say, but probably objectively a more diluted sense, because the extremity of World War II and Auschwitz is probably unparalleled, but it's all relative. Yeah,
Ukraine relative to any normal life is obviously extreme, but Auschwitz relative to almost anything in human history is extreme and hopefully never repeated.
So there's a bit of it about Oleksandr Usyk and how that links, but he is fighting Daniel Dubois for the world heavyweight titles plural, for the reasons we discussed at the very beginning of the episode. Should I just explain the heavyweight division very quickly?
Go for it.
Not that people really need that much of an introduction to it, but it isn't really obvious when various divisions are established because of all the palaver that we were discussing earlier about the various governing bodies and when they were sanctioned and this, that and the other. But at some point in the early 20th century, perhaps between 1913 and 1920, the light heavyweight division was formed, and that had a maximum weight of 175 pounds, 79 kilos if you're on the continent, and 12 stone 7 pounds at home. And that by extension created the heavyweight division. So anyone who weighed more than 175 pounds was a heavyweight.
Fair enough.
That's now slightly changed because there's now a gap between light heavyweight and heavyweight, which is the cruiserweight division. The current threshold, Jack, is 200 pounds. 91 kilos, 14 stone 4. It's the biggest of the big, taking each other on. There's no upper limit. You can be massive.
Which is why you end up with crazy fights like, what was it, David Hay versus
Valuev,
yeah. He's about a foot taller than him.
Yeah, and this is the division though. The reason I wanted to just sort of intro the heavyweight division, just and just talk a little bit about it at the conclusion of this episode, is because this is the one that's like captures people's imagination. It's the Roy Jones Jr.'s, Lennox Lewis, Evander Holyfield and Tyson, Frank Bruno, George Foreman, Ali, Joe Frazier, Larry Holmes, Floyd Patterson, all that stuff, Rocky Marciano, and Joe Louis, who's probably the first major boxing superstar. All heavyweights.
Yeah.
And, contemporaneously, you're talking Tyson Fury, AJ, Andy Ruiz Jr., Joseph Parker, Deontay Wilder. You've obviously just mentioned David Hay, and we just mentioned earlier Vitaly and Vladimir Klitschko. So, a really glamorous division. I think, in fact, the parallel I would draw is I would say world heavyweight title fights are like the men's 100 meters.
Yes.
They come around more often, but they are the blue ribbon event of boxing.
You don't need to necessarily have the greatest boxers in the world at it to capture the public's imagination, where it takes a supremely talented boxer in other weight classes to become a superstar.
Yes.
Like heavyweights default to superstar status. you need a Manny Pacquiao or a Floyd Mayweather at other weight classes, generally speaking. Obviously, notwithstanding aficionados who will know everyone in every weight class, but just the, Joe Public.
Yes.
I would say.
These are the household names, unless you're absolutely unbelievable.
Yes.
And they're the ones that, are hyped the most, get the biggest billing, normally the main event on cards, always pay-per-view. I mean, boxing generally is nowadays, but yeah, it is boxing, basically. If you could probably lose all divisions except the heavyweight one and still be able to maintain the sport in a fairly global and commercial sense quite comfortably, I would have thought.
Yeah.
So yeah, we got Dubois, and Usyk. Usyk's already one of the greats, arguably. He is the unified champ. There's two different phrases. They use unification and undisputed, but they effectively mean the same thing. He is Ukraine's third heavyweight champ behind the two Klitschko's. But interestingly, he's the first ever to be undisputed cruiserweight and heavyweight champion of the world. Only two other dudes have actually done that in two other divisions, which is Terence Crawford at light welterweight and welterweight, and a Japanese chap called Neo Inoue, I think. I might be mispronouncing his surname. We do that all the time. Bantamweight and super bantamweight.
I was going to say it's going to be at a lighter weight, isn't it?
Yeah. But Usyk's beaten the likes of Krzysztof Glowacki, Mariusz Bradus, Murat Gaziev, Tony Bellew at cruiserweight, and then he's beaten all the Brits basically at heavyweight. Derek Chisora, AJ.
Fair enough.
Tyson Fury, Dubois. He's 23-0 going into this one. 14 stoppages. So that's what we were saying earlier about him being very skillful. Dubois is an interesting guy at the other end, though. Already lost to Usyk once, as we said.
Yes.
But he's our 11th world champ, current holder of the IBF belt, because Usyk vacated it after beating Fury, and then Dubois beat Filip Hrgović to win the vacant title, and then he beat Joshua to retain it. And he used to be a WA title holder, but whatever, like we said about the various different belts that are doing the rounds. He's also a former British and Commonwealth heavyweight champion. He's beaten Joshua Hrgović, as I said, and Jarrell Miller. Controversially beaten by Usyk in the first fight, to be fair. He dropped Usyk with a body shot, which is adjudged to be a low blow. So Usyk was given time to recover, and I think it probably was a low blow, but some people think it's controversial. But he was knocked out by Joe Joyce 5 years ago, so he's not an unblemished record. And, fun fact, his sister, Caroline Dubois, is also a boxer. And she represented Great Britain in 2018 she became European Junior, World Youth and Youth Olympic champion. And last year she became the WBC Women's Lightweight World Champion, and she's currently 11-0. There you go. Good genes. So yeah, it's one to look forward to. Yeah, if whoever wins it will go down in history. All the they will by de facto. That they would become the undisputed heavyweight champion of the world. And before Usyk, the last person to do that was Lennox Lewis. So it was a while. Hence the reason why you will go down in history. And I just think it's worth a billing because, world title fights do happen, but they don't happen all the time. And certainly not ones that are unification title fights. So I thought that was a good way just to bring it back round to this week's event.
Yeah, you did it nicely. I'm impressed.
Thanks, mate. I was very impressed with your story. But yeah, I don't have a great deal else to say other than, tune in if you want to watch a heavyweight boxing match.
Yeah, I'm going to assume pay-per-view is probably a place to go
always,
in various...
Always pay-per-view, mate.
Various places. But if you're into it and you like it, it'll be worth the money, I'm sure. I'm actually quite interested. Now, when's it on? Is it Saturday night, I'm guessing?
Saturday night, yeah. And it's all on DAZN. So yeah.
Nice.
It's at Wembley on DAZN. It starts at 5:30 British Standard Time, 12:30 Eastern Time, 9:30 in the morning. Is it Pacific Time?
It is Pacific Time, yeah.
Yeah, that's when the undercard starts.
So the main event will be, I'm guessing, 9-10 p.m.
Yeah, over here.
British time.
And then adjust accordingly for those in different time zones. Yeah. Boxing.
There you go.
Another sport covered. What is next?
So, next up is something which I'm actually very, very excited to learn about because it's not something that in England we know all that much about, but it is the All-Ireland Football Championship final, and we will be learning about it and presenting it, and hopefully we'll do a good job.
And if you're Irish and we offend you, apologies in advance.
There we go. I'm sure it won't be the last time you're offended by the English, and it's definitely not the first time.
Yep. Cool.
Well,
that is exciting. I guess I'll speak to you next week then, mate.
I can't wait, and have a good weekend. I hope the warmth isn't too much.
Yeah, thanks. I will do. See you in a bit.
See you, mate. Bye. Once again, this has been the Sporting Almanac podcast. Thank you for listening to the story today. If you can, please like, subscribe, review, comment, message us, or follow us on social media. Or, best of all, tell your friends about us. We're on Instagram and Blue Sky at The Sporting Almanac. If you want to drop us an email with ideas for new episodes, left field events, or stories we might like, our email is thesportingalmanacpodcast@gmail.com. For those who subscribe to Spotify, The Fighter of Auschwitz is currently available as an audiobook, free of your subscription in English and Dutch versions. We'll see you next week for the All-Ireland. Until then, stay curious. Sport is nothing without the history that makes it. Goodbye.